Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? And one of the things that started to transpire in my life is as that debt got worse and I was living paycheck to paycheck, making five figures, a month, high five figures a month. I was like, there's something wrong here. There's a disconnect. And then I decided I made a decision. I wanted to go in and I wanted to try something different. I wanted to see what would happen if I started to invest in myself, even though I was in debt. And I've shared the story about investing with Brendan Burchard before. And so I was playing this victim in this sense that it was like, I don't deserve to have this money. I don't deserve to have success. I don't deserve all these things because it had been so embedded and ingrained in me. And so I'd keep sabotaging and sabotaging and sabotaging and sabotaging. And the more that I did that, the more that that became my reality because what you think becomes what you speak. And so as I got deeper into it and I ended up starting my own business, at first I was undercharging. I used to be a professional photographer. Many of you know this. I've shared it before. And I was massively undercharging in the marketplace. In fact, so much so that I went from this multiple six figures a year job to start my first business to having to literally borrow money from my girlfriend who lived with me to pay our rent because I was that poor, because I did not yet have the ability to charge what I believed that I was worth in the market. And and one of the things that I think is really powerful about stepping into entrepreneurship is you really have to face your demons. Like, I will tell you this, if you want to find out who you are, go start a fucking business because you're going to find out real fast. And that started happening to me. So at first it was slow, right? And then it would slowly get better and better and better. And I built this business and I built this company and I started getting recognition for it, getting in magazines and publications and blogs and blah, 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 blah. And so I started pulling myself out of debt. And it took me a long time because being 50 grand in debt when you go from making six figures to now making six fucking dollars, that took some effort to get through. And I realized in the growth of it all, I had this really interesting intersection in personal development with guys like Gary Vaynerchuk very early on in my journey. And kept noticing this weird commonality that they had, where it was like they all seemed to believe in themselves somehow, and they didn't apologize for who they were. And I used to always be the apology guy. I used to always be so terrified that you wouldn't like me. And so I would shut down whatever capacity I had of self. Now we know because of so many of the conversations we've had on this show and my own experience, I know that that's really that trauma response. And so I had to work through that. And as I worked through that, I started charging more money. And as I charged more money, I started to pull myself out of debt. I started getting able to take care of myself. But then there were aspects of my life that still weren't working because I was still in this really volatile relationship with a girlfriend at the time. I was out of debt, but my brothers were pissed off at me all the time. I was still overweight. And so I made a declaration of myself. Now, you guys know about the mirror moment and asking myself, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? That became a catalyst and a cornerstone. But then I talk about that 4 years from 26 to 30. And it was just like, again, one step forward, a million step backwards. What started to happen in that window is I started to build confidence because the biggest motive victim that I played was not believing in myself. Like, to not believe in yourself is, and I get it. Let me be clear. And especially if this is the first time you've ever heard me before, you might be like, this guy's talking out of his ass. At 27 years old, I had no confidence. I did not believe in myself in any capacity. And so I said to myself, okay, the thing that I need to do is start to build skills around difficult aspects of my life so that I can start to trust myself. And I didn't have those exact words then, but it felt like if I can just like do this, tiptoe through it every single day, that it'll start to grow and build and I'll start to figure out who the fuck I am. And that's exactly what I did. And what happened was it started with fitness because I realized and I knew that the one thing that had always brought me joy when I was younger was to play sports. And I was in pretty good shape in high school. I was captain of the wrestling team. I was on the football team, the baseball team, even though I sucked. And so, it was like, I'm going to go and get back in shape. And getting in shape was such a nightmare. It started with yoga, and then it moved to hot yoga, then weightlifting, and then bike riding and the whole nine. Next thing you know, I lost like 120 something pounds, and then eventually 130, 140, and almost 150, where I went from like 350 down to 220. And then because it was fucking overkill, I eventually got back to where I am about now, about 220. And so the thing that happened in that process is I realized that playing the victim around my body was looking at this thing, and I'm going to lose some people, and I get it. And you can cancel me. I don't care. I'm going to say it. I was allowing this idea of body positivity to be the crutch for being okay with being overweight. I was allowing this idea that it's in my family that we're all fat, that I allowed myself to be fat. I allowed this idea that because I'm not educated in nutrition, that I'm going to allow myself to be fat. So I'm playing the victim by letting everybody else convince me what I believe is true. Now, what came to transpire in this is I recognized that I could, in fact, be in great physical shape because I had, in fact, been in great physical shape before. So I had some evidence to prove it possible, but I also had seen some major, major transformations. There's this guy named Arthur. You got to look up this video on YouTube. It's called type in DDP Yoga Arthur. And this dude has an amazing story where through yoga, he lost like 100 pounds, got off of crutches, was able to walk, became physically fit. And I felt so fucking inspired by that, and watching the CrossFit games, that I was like, okay, cool. Let's do this. Let's change. Let's get healthy. Because I realized being unhealthy, putting bad food in my body, not taking care of my sleep, drinking all the time, fast food 20 times a week, probably more, was a victim. That was me playing the victim. My stepdad used to call me fat. My mom called me fat. And so guess what? I was fat. I was living in exactly what they told me I would be. And so as it goes, I started getting healthy, but the education had to come into play because, again, I didn't really know how to eat and I didn't really know how to work out. And so I became a certified nutritionist and personal trainer because that was the thing about pulling myself out. All of this is to say this: you have to take inventory of your life. You have to look at where you actually are. And if you're blaming anyone for any element of your life, you need to sit down and question the authenticity of that. Like, is it real? Because a lot of people are willing to blame those around them without asking the question of, is it really their fault, or did I put myself here? And if you're anything like me, chances are you put yourself here. And that's a really hard truth to sit in. Most people don't want to sit in that truth. Most people want to run from that truth because it's uncomfortable, because it hurts, because it's ugly, because it sucks, because it means that you also have to do the fucking work to get yourself out. And most people don't want to do the work because it's hard and it's grimy and it takes longer than you would ever imagine. It costs more money than you could ever believe. And every single time you start, you're like, am I doing this right? What the fuck's going on? And it feels lonely and ostracizing, but it's not. And in fact, the thing that happens when you start to choose yourself, everything in your life gets better. Everything in your life gets different. Everything in your life starts to take shape into this truth of a reality that you want, a narrative that you want. And I cannot tell you how empowering it is, but you have to recognize and ask yourself the question: am I playing the victim? I'm uneducated. Okay, cool. Well, what am I going to do about it? I'm overweight. Okay, cool. What am I going to do about it? I'm in debt. Okay, cool. What am I going to do about it? I just started looking at my life and saying, what do I have to do? Like, what do I really have to do? Because I don't want this. I don't want the shitty relationships. I don't want the poor body. I don't want the ill health. I don't want the fucking crippling debt, which you guys all know exists. Like, I was like, I don't want those things. And so many people focused on the things that they don't want that they forget that it's possible to have what they do want. And so I started to change my narrative and I started focusing on only the things that I did want? I said, okay, what do I want in order to have the life that I want to have? What do I want it to look like? Okay, I want physical health. I want great relationships, great friendships. I want to fix the relationship with my brothers. I want to be out of debt. I want to stop smoking and stop drinking. I want to leave Indiana. I want to go and travel the world. I want to actually write the books that I said I was going to write. I want to have the podcast. I want to do all these things. And so what happened is I started to narrow down the what I could do. I mean, even this summer, my friend Kayla did this thing called 75 Hard. And it's like she's a working mother who's building a business. And I was like making all these excuses why I couldn't do it. And then my friend Keith did it. And I was like, wait a second, hold on. And what happened is I started to get confirmation bias because I was being a victim. I can't do 75 hard. It doesn't matter. Like, why would I do it? I'm already in good shape, blah, 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 blah. And then I thought to myself, actually, what I need to do is do that shit because if they can do it, I can. And that's just kind of the thing that I've started to leverage in my life that has actually brought me to where I am. And so when I think about this thing that I wrote to start this off, it was like I was justifying being the victim. We all have the right to play that role. You're allowed to do that. Please, by all means. But you have to understand that if you don't start to change, and even though change is hard, and even though transformation is hard, and even though it fucking sucks to do this, if you do not make a decision to start moving forward in your life, nothing in your life is going to be different.